The silver station hung in space like a massive jewel, its surface catching the light from 3 distant suns. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his shuttle, watching as they approached the Zephyrian Empire's capital station. He adjusted his formal uniform one last time, making sure everything was perfect. This was humanity's first major diplomatic meeting with one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, and he couldn't afford any mistakes. "Nervous, sir?" Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez asked from the pilot's seat. She was grinning at him through the reflection in the window. Jake shook his head. "Just careful. The Zephyrians have been ruling this part of space for 10,000 years. We've been out here for barely 50. We need to make a good impression." The shuttle docked smoothly, and the airlocks opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped through with Amy and 2 other crew members from the USS Valiant. The station's interior took his breath away. Crystal pillars stretched up to a ceiling that showed the stars above, and strange plants from a dozen worlds grew in perfect gardens along the walkways. Aliens of many species moved through the space, but Jake noticed how they all seemed to step aside when the Zephyrians walked past. The Zephyrians were tall and elegant, with skin that glowed softly with bioluminescent patterns. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shift colors as they moved. Everything about them spoke of ancient power and pride. A Zephyrian official greeted them with a slight bow. "Captain Morrison, welcome to Crown Station. The Emperor sends his regards. Please follow me to the reception hall." The hall was enormous, filled with dignitaries from across the galaxy. Jake recognized representatives from the Galactic Council, all here to witness humanity's formal acceptance into the greater community of spacefaring races. He felt the weight of their stares as he entered. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few seemed openly hostile. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, sat Emperor Zarnoth himself, draped in robes that shimmered like starlight. Beside him stood a young Zephyrian woman whose skin glowed brighter than the others, with patterns of gold and crimson flowing across her features. Princess Xylaneth, heir to the throne. Jake approached and bowed as protocol demanded. "Your Majesty, it is an honor to represent humanity at this historic gathering." The Emperor's voice was deep and resonant. "Captain Morrison, humanity has shown remarkable progress in a short time. We welcome you to the Council, though you still have much to prove." "We understand, Your Majesty, and we're eager to learn from the older civilizations." Princess Xylaneth stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Learn?" she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "Humans have nothing we would teach. You are children playing with toys you barely understand." Jake felt Amy tense beside him, but he kept his face calm. "Your Highness, we may be young as a spacefaring species, but we're willing to work hard and prove ourselves." The princess laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Prove yourselves? Very well, human. Our people have a tradition. When new species join the Council, they may participate in the trial of worth. A combat demonstration to show their strength and courage." She smiled, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. "I challenge you, Captain Morrison, to face me in the arena. Let us see if humans are truly worthy of standing among the stars." The hall erupted in whispers. Jake felt hundreds of eyes on him. He knew this was a trap. The princess was testing him, trying to humiliate humanity in front of the entire council. If he refused, they would see humans as cowards. If he accepted and lost badly, they would see them as weak. "I'm here as a diplomat, Your Highness," Jake said carefully, "not as a warrior." "Of course," the princess said, her glow brightening with cruel amusement. "Because you know you cannot win. You won't last a minute, human. Your kind are soft, fragile. You have no place here among real civilizations." The Emperor frowned. "Xylaneth, that is enough. Captain Morrison is a guest." But the damage was done. Jake could see it in the faces around him. The other species were watching, judging. If he backed down now, humanity would never be taken seriously. They would always be seen as the weak ones, the ones who ran from a challenge. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about the colonies back home, the millions of humans counting on this mission to succeed. He thought about the wars he'd fought on the frontier, the impossible battles where humans had learned to survive against enemies stronger and faster than them. "I accept your challenge, Your Highness," he said quietly. The hall fell silent. Princess Xylaneth's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to agree. Then her smile returned, even sharper than before. "Excellent," she purred. "We shall meet in the Grand Colosseum tomorrow at midday. I will demonstrate to everyone what happens when primitives try to stand with their betters." That night, back on the Valiant, Amy paced back and forth in Jake's quarters. "This is insane, sir. The Zephyrians are trained warriors. They have psionic abilities. They've been fighting for thousands of years." "I know," Jake said calmly. He was reviewing files on Zephyrian combat styles, watching videos of their warriors in action. "Then why did you accept? You could have found a way out, claimed diplomatic immunity, anything." Jake looked up at her. "Because if I had refused, humanity would never recover from it. We'd always be the species that was too scared to fight. Every negotiation, every treaty, every interaction from now on would start with that moment of cowardice." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the station in the distance. "Besides, the princess doesn't know everything about humans." "What do you mean?" "She thinks we're weak because we're young. She thinks we're fragile because we don't have natural armor or psionic powers. But she's never seen what humans can do when we're pushed. She's never had to survive the way we have." He turned back to Amy with a slight smile. "She's never fought someone who refuses to give up no matter what." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Make sure the crew is ready. If this goes wrong, if I lose badly, we might need to leave quickly. And Amy, send a message back to Earth. Tell them what's happening. Just in case." The next morning, Jake woke early and went through his training routine. Push-ups, running, combat drills. His body was sore from the long journey, but he pushed through it. Pain was just weakness leaving the body, his old instructor used to say. As he prepared to leave for the arena, he looked at himself in the mirror. Just a human. No glowing skin, no psionic powers, no natural weapons. Just a man who had survived too many fights and learned too many hard lessons. "Let's see if that's enough," he said to his reflection, and headed out to face a princess who thought she'd already won. The Grand Colosseum was older than human civilization. Its walls had witnessed 10,000 years of combat, honor, and blood. Jake walked through the entrance tunnel, hearing the roar of the crowd above. Thousands of aliens from across the galaxy had gathered to watch a human face a Zephyrian princess. Most of them expected it to be over quickly. Amy walked beside him, carrying his equipment bag. "The medical team is standing by," she said, "just in case." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Jake said with a slight smile. "I'm serious, sir. If it gets too bad, just yield. There's no shame in losing to someone with her advantages." Jake stopped and looked at her. "Yes, there is. Not for me personally, but for every human who comes after us. This isn't just about winning or losing, Amy. It's about showing them we don't quit." They reached the entrance to the arena floor. Through the opening, Jake could see the massive circular space, covered in sand that had been stained by countless battles. The ceiling was open to space, held back by an energy field that let them see the stars. Seating rose up in tiers all around, filled with beings from 100 different worlds. "Captain Morrison," a Zephyrian official approached them. "You will enter when the horns sound. The rules are simple. The fight continues until one combatant yields, falls unconscious, or dies. Lethal force is permitted, though not encouraged. Do you understand? I understand, Jake said. The princess has chosen Kravtar as the combat style. It combines physical fighting with psionic attacks. You will feel pressure on your mind, attempts to confuse or paralyze you. This is legal within the rules. Jake nodded. He'd read about this. Zephyrians could project their thoughts as weapons, creating fear or pain in their opponents' minds. It was one of the reasons they dominated their region of space for so long. The horns sounded, deep and resonant. Jake stripped off his jacket, leaving him in a simple combat suit. He'd chosen light armor, nothing that would slow him down. He stepped out onto the sand. The crowd noise hit him like a wave, thousands of voices, most of them jeering or laughing. He ignored them and focused on the opposite entrance, where Princess Xylaneth emerged. She wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid gold, covering her chest and arms but leaving her legs free for movement. Her skin glowed brighter than before, patterns of red and orange flowing across her like fire. She raised her arms to the crowd, and they cheered wildly. They met in the center of the arena. Up close, Jake could see that she was taller than him by several inches, with long limbs that suggested both speed and reach. Her eyes were completely golden, without any white or pupil, and they looked at him with absolute contempt. "Last chance to yield, human," she said. "Save yourself the humiliation." "I'm good, thanks," Jake replied. A Zephyrian referee stood between them, holding up one hand. "Combat will begin when I lower my hand. Fight with honor." He paused, then dropped his hand and leaped backward. Princess Xylaneth moved like lightning. She closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, her fist aimed at Jake's face. He barely got his guard up in time, blocking the strike, but feeling the impact jar his entire arm. She was strong, much stronger than she looked. She spun, her leg sweeping toward his head. Jake ducked and backed away, giving himself space. The princess pursued, launching a combination of strikes that he blocked or dodged. Each impact sent shocks through his arms. This wasn't going to be easy. Then he felt it, a pressure in his mind, like someone was pushing against the inside of his skull. Images flashed through his thoughts, memories of failures and fears. He stumbled, and the princess's fist caught him in the ribs. Pain exploded through his chest, and he went down on one knee. The crowd roared. Princess Xylaneth stood over him, her glow brightening with triumph. "You see? Not even a minute. Yield now, human." Jake looked up at her, breathing hard. The psionic pressure was intense, but he'd felt worse. He'd been shot, stabbed, burned, and broken more times than he could count. Pain was an old friend. He stood up slowly. "Not yet," he said. The princess's expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across her features. She attacked again, faster this time, and Jake stopped trying to block everything. Instead, he let some strikes through, taking hits to his arms and shoulders while protecting his head and vital organs. Each impact hurt, but he was learning her patterns, understanding her rhythm. 1 minute passed, then 2. The crowd's jeering began to fade, replaced by confused murmuring. Why was the human still standing? Princess Xylaneth increased her psionic assault, flooding Jake's mind with fear and pain. He felt his legs weaken, felt the urge to just lie down and let it end. But he'd felt this before, too. In the frontier wars, when the enemy had weapons that made your bones feel like they were breaking from the inside. When you wanted to quit but couldn't, because your friends depended on you. He'd learned then that pain was just information, and you could choose how to respond to it. Jake started to counterattack. His strikes were different from hers, using techniques she'd never seen. He swept her leg and nearly took her down. She recovered with her psionic abilities, but he was already moving, staying close where her reach advantage meant less. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Princess Xylaneth was breathing hard now, her glow flickering slightly. She'd never fought anyone who lasted this long. Most opponents either fell to her physical prowess or broke under her psionic attacks. But this human kept coming, kept adapting, kept fighting. Jake caught her wrist during a punch and pulled her off balance. He swept her legs and took her to the ground. They grappled in the sand, and he could feel her strength beginning to fade. She was faster and stronger, but she'd never trained for endurance. She'd never needed to. They broke apart and stood again. The princess was favoring her left side now, breathing heavily. Jake wasn't in much better shape. His ribs ached, his arms were covered in bruises, and blood dripped from a cut above his eye, but he was still standing. "How?" she gasped, her voice barely audible over the silent crowd. "How are you still fighting?" "Because I have to," Jake said simply. "Because my people are counting on me. Because giving up isn't in my nature." He pressed forward, using the advantage of her exhaustion. She tried to mount another psionic attack, but it was weaker now, easier to push through. He could see her eyes widening as she realized what was happening. She was losing. 20 minutes had passed. The princess swung wildly, her technique breaking down. Jake ducked under the strike and moved behind her, locking his arm around her throat in a chokehold. Not tight enough to hurt her, but enough to control her. "Yield," he said quietly in her ear. "Yield with honor, Your Highness. This proves nothing but stubbornness." He felt her body tense, felt her pride warring with reality. The arena was completely silent now, thousands of beings watching this impossible moment. A human had not only lasted more than a minute, he was winning. Princess Xylaneth tapped his arm twice, the universal signal of submission. Jake released her immediately and stepped back. The referee rushed forward, raising Jake's arm. "The human is victorious!" The crowd erupted, but Jake barely heard it. He was too busy making sure the princess was okay. She knelt in the sand, her head down, her glow dim. He knew that feeling, the weight of defeat in front of everyone you knew. He offered her his hand. She looked up at him, her golden eyes filled with shock and something else. Confusion, maybe, or the first hint of respect. She didn't take his hand, standing on her own instead. "You fought well," Jake said. She didn't respond, just turned and walked toward the exit. But Jake saw her shoulders straighten as she went, saw her glow begin to brighten again. She was a princess, and she would not show weakness, even in defeat. As Jake left the arena, Amy rushed to his side with the medical team. "That was incredible, sir. Absolutely incredible." Jake winced as they examined his ribs. It was necessary. Now let's hope it was worth it. But even as he said it, he felt a strange unease. He'd humiliated a princess in front of the entire galaxy. He'd proven humanity's strength, yes, but he'd also made a powerful enemy, and something told him this wasn't over. The news of Jake's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every news feed, every communication channel carried the story of how a human captain had defeated a Zephyrian princess in ritual combat. Some species celebrated it as proof that the old powers weren't invincible. Others saw it as a dangerous upset to the natural order. On Crown Station, reactions were more divided. Jake noticed the change immediately. Some Zephyrians nodded to him with respect as he passed. Others turned away, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with anger or disgust. The human delegation's quarters were under constant surveillance now, though the guards tried to be subtle about it. "I don't like this," Amy said during their daily briefing. She pulled up a display showing ship movements around the station. "Look at this. 3 Zephyrian warships have moved into closer orbit in the past 2 days, and our communications with Earth are experiencing unusual delays." Commander Kyle Bennett, their tactical officer, leaned forward. "It could be normal security. We did just embarrass their princess in front of everyone." "Or it could be something worse," Amy countered. Sir, I recommend we consider leaving. We've made our point. Humanity has proven itself. There's no reason to stay and risk an incident. Jake shook his head. We leave now, and it looks like we're running. Besides, we still have the formal council induction ceremony in 3 days. We need to be here for that. What Jake didn't tell them was that he'd been receiving strange messages. Anonymous warnings sent through encrypted channels telling him to watch his back, to trust no one. Someone on the station was trying to tell him something, but he couldn't figure out who or why. Deep in the royal quarters, Princess Xylaneth stood before a window, staring out at the stars. Her chambers were dark, her bioluminescent glow dim with shame. She couldn't stop replaying the fight in her mind, couldn't stop seeing the moment when the human had beaten her. Still brooding, daughter? The voice came from behind her. She turned to see General Vorkath entering her chambers. He was old for a Zephyrian, his patterns faded to silver and gray, but his presence was commanding. He commanded the imperial military, and his word carried nearly as much weight as the emperor's. He defeated me, Xylaneth said, her voice bitter. A human, a primitive from a species that has barely left their home system. Yes, he did, Vorkath agreed, settling into a chair. And in doing so, he has created an opportunity. The princess turned to face him fully. What do you mean? Another figure entered, robes flowing. High Chancellor Drelmon, the Emperor's chief advisor. His patterns were deep purple, a sign of ancient lineage. Your Highness, the General and I have been discussing the human situation. Their presence on the council represents a threat to the Empire. They beat me in a fair fight, Xylaneth said, as much as I hate to admit it. That's not what I mean, Drelmon continued. Think about it. Humanity is young, aggressive, and now they've proven they can stand against us. In 100 years, maybe less, they'll be challenging our authority in this sector. Other young species will look to them as inspiration to resist our guidance. Vorkath stood and approached the princess. Your defeat, unfortunate as it was, has given us a reason to act. There is already dissent among the council members. Many believe humanity advanced too quickly, that they weren't ready for membership. If we could provide evidence that humans are dangerous, unstable, a threat to galactic peace. What are you suggesting? The princess asked, though she was beginning to understand. An incident, Drelmon said carefully. A human attack on a civilian target, or perhaps evidence of human aggression toward other species. With proper documentation, we could have them expelled from the council. Their colonies could be placed under Zephyrian protection for the safety of the sector. You want me to help you frame them? Xylaneth asked. We want you to help us protect the Empire, Vorkath corrected. Your father is old, Your Highness. He sees humanity through nostalgic eyes, remembering when the Zephyrians were young and struggling for recognition. But we cannot afford sentiment. We must act now, while we still have the advantage. Xylaneth looked between them, her mind racing. Part of her screamed that this was wrong, that it was cowardly to attack through deception rather than honest confrontation. But another part, the part that still burned with shame from her defeat, wanted revenge. What do you need from me? She asked quietly. Vorkath smiled. Just your silence, Your Highness, and perhaps your testimony when the time comes. You fought the human. You saw their aggression firsthand. Your word would carry great weight. Meanwhile, Jake was discovering that something was definitely wrong. He'd tried to send a detailed report back to Earth, but the message had been blocked at the station's communication hub. When he asked why, he was told there were technical difficulties. When he asked to speak with the Emperor, he was told the Emperor was unavailable. We're being isolated, he told his crew that night. Someone is cutting us off from our support. But who? Amy asked. And why? You won the challenge fairly. Maybe that's the problem, Kyle suggested. Maybe someone doesn't want humanity to succeed here. Jake pulled up star maps, studying the space around Crown Station. Look at this. The Zephyrian ships aren't just near the station. They're positioned to cut off our escape routes. If we tried to leave now, they could intercept us before we made it to the jump point. So we're trapped, Amy said. Not trapped, just limited in our options. Jake thought for a moment. I need to get off this station quietly, see if I can figure out what's really going on. That's too dangerous, sir. Everything's dangerous right now, but sitting here waiting for something to happen is worse. He turned to Kyle. Start preparing the Valiant for a quick departure. Don't make it obvious, but make sure we can leave at a moment's notice if we need to. That night, Jake left the human quarters through a maintenance tunnel. He'd learned the station's layout by studying every schematic he could access. The tunnels were used by the station's service crews, mostly aliens from species that did the work the Zephyrians considered beneath them. He made his way to a data hub he'd identified earlier, a place where communication traffic was routed before being sent out to the galaxy. If someone was blocking his messages, this was where it would happen. The hub was guarded, but lightly. Jake waited until the guard stepped away, then slipped inside. The data systems were complex, but he'd trained for this kind of infiltration. Within minutes, he'd accessed the logs. What he found made his blood run cold. His messages weren't just being blocked, they were being altered. Reports he'd sent about peaceful diplomatic meetings were being changed to sound aggressive and threatening. Questions he'd asked about trade agreements were being rewritten as demands. Someone was systematically painting humanity as dangerous and unreasonable, and the logs showed the alterations were being authorized by High Chancellor Drellmon's office. Jake downloaded everything he could onto a small data device, but as he worked, he heard voices approaching. Multiple footsteps, moving with purpose. He'd been discovered. He slipped out of the hub through a different exit, making his way through the service tunnels. Behind him, he heard alarms beginning to sound. They knew someone had accessed the system. Jake's communicator buzzed. Amy's voice came through, urgent and frightened. "Sir, we have a problem. The station security just issued a warrant for your arrest. They're saying you attempted to sabotage station systems." "I didn't sabotage anything," Jake said, moving quickly through the tunnels. "But I found something. They're framing us, Amy. This whole thing is a setup. Get back here now. We need to get off this station." "Agreed. Prepare the Valiant for immediate departure. I'm on my way." But as Jake rounded a corner, he found his path blocked by Zephyrian security forces, their weapons trained on him. Behind them stood Princess Xylaneth, her expression unreadable. "Captain Morrison," she said formally, "you are under arrest for espionage and attempted sabotage. Please surrender peacefully." Jake looked at her, at the guards, at the weapons pointed at his head. He thought about the data device in his pocket, the only proof of the conspiracy against humanity. He thought about his crew, waiting for him on the Valiant. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "I know you're involved in this somehow, but I also know you're better than this. Don't let them use your pride to start a war." Something flickered in her golden eyes. Doubt, maybe, or recognition. But she said nothing, and the guards moved forward to take him into custody. The holding cell was small and dark, designed to hold dangerous prisoners. Jake sat on the metal bench, his mind working through everything that had happened. The data device was still hidden in a secret pocket of his uniform. The guards had searched him but hadn't found it. Small victories. Hours passed. Jake could hear activity outside, raised voices and hurried footsteps. Something was happening, something big. He stood and moved to the door, trying to hear better. Then the door opened. Princess Xylaneth stood there, alone, her glow dim in the darkness. "Your Highness," Jake said carefully. "Come to gloat?" "Come to talk," she replied, slipping inside. The door closed behind her. "We don't have much time. They're planning something, Captain, something that will destroy your people." "I know. I found the evidence. Jake pulled out the data device. They've been altering my communications, making humanity look aggressive, but I don't understand why. What do they gain? Xylaneth's pattern shifted to a troubled blue. General Vorkath and Chancellor Drellmon want war with humanity. They believe your species will eventually challenge our empire, so they want to eliminate the threat now while you're still weak. They plan to stage an attack on a civilian station and blame it on your people. And you helped them? Jake asked, unable to keep the anger from his voice. I agreed to their plan, she admitted, her glow flickering with shame. I was angry, humiliated. I wanted revenge for my defeat, but I've been listening to their discussions, and I realize now that this isn't about me or you. It's about power. They want to use the war to take control of the empire from my father. Jake felt a chill. A coup. Yes. Once the war starts, they'll declare my father too weak to lead. They'll install me as a puppet ruler while they hold the real power. She looked at him directly. I may be proud, Captain, but I'm not a traitor to my own family. So what do we do? You need to get off this station. Take your ship and run. I'll help you escape. Jake shook his head. Running won't solve anything. They'll still stage their attack. They'll still frame humanity. We need to expose them. How? Vorkath controls the military. Drellmon controls information flow. No one will believe us. Then we make them believe. Jake held up the data device. This has evidence of the altered communications, but we need more. We need proof of their plan to stage the attack. Xylaneth was quiet for a moment. There's a meeting happening now, in the military command center. Vorkath is briefing his commanders on the operation. If we could record that, then we'd have everything we need. Jake stood. Can you get us there? It's incredibly dangerous. If we're caught, they'll kill us both. I know. But it's the only way to stop this. The princess looked at him, and he saw a new expression on her face. Respect, genuine and earned. You're either very brave or very stupid, human. Probably both, Jake said with a slight smile. Now let's go save both our peoples. They moved through the station using service corridors and maintenance shafts. Xylaneth knew the station better than anyone, and her royal access codes opened doors that would have stopped Jake cold. They reached the military sector within 20 minutes. The command center was heavily guarded, but the princess's presence gave them cover. The guards saluted as she passed, assuming she was there for the meeting. Jake stayed close behind her, pretending to be a prisoner being escorted. They slipped into an observation room that overlooked the main command center through one-way glass. Below, General Vorkath stood before a holographic display, showing several commanders a star system Jake didn't recognize. The target is Research Station Gamma, Vorkath was saying, a civilian facility with minimal defenses. We'll use a human weapon signature that we acquired during the Frontier Wars. The attack will be quick and devastating. 15,000 casualties. One of the commanders spoke up. The Galactic Council will investigate. How do we ensure the blame stays on humanity? We have altered communications showing human aggression, Drellmon said, appearing on a communication screen. We have Princess Xylaneth's testimony about the captain's violent nature, and we'll have wreckage with human weapon signatures. The Council will have no choice but to authorize action against the human colonies. Jake was recording everything on his data device. His hands were shaking with rage. 15,000 innocent beings were going to die just to start a war. When do we strike? Another commander asked. Tomorrow during the council induction ceremony, Vorkath said. While all eyes are on the station, the attack will occur. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, it will be too late to stop the war. We have enough, Xylaneth whispered. We need to leave now. But as they turned to go, an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed throughout the command center. Security breach in the observation room, a voice announced. Seal all exits. They know we're here, Jake said. Doors slammed shut around them. They were trapped in the small observation room with armed guards converging on their position. "I'm sorry," Xylaneth said. "I should have been more careful." "Not your fault." Jake was already thinking, planning. "Is there another way out?" "No. This room was designed for secure observation. One way in, one way out." Below them, Vorkath looked up at the observation window. Even through the one-way glass, Jake felt the weight of his gaze. Well, the general's voice came through speakers in the room. "Captain Morrison and the princess. How convenient. Now we can deal with both problems at once." "Father will stop you," Xylaneth called out. "Your father is already under sedation, Your Highness. A sudden illness, the doctors say. Very tragic. By the time he recovers, this will all be over." Vorkath gestured to his guards. "Take them both. Kill the human. The princess will be held until she agrees to cooperate." The door to the observation room opened. Guards poured in, weapons ready. Jake put himself between them and the princess, knowing it was futile but unable to do anything else. Then Amy's voice crackled through his communicator. "Sir, I don't know if you can hear this, but the Valiant is in position. Kyle says to hit the floor, now." Jake grabbed Xylaneth and pulled her down just as the observation window exploded inward. The Valiant had somehow maneuvered close to the station and fired a precisely targeted shot that shattered the glass without causing hull breach. The shockwave knocked the guards back. Jake and the princess jumped through the broken window into the command center. Chaos erupted as guards tried to figure out what was happening. Jake ran for the nearest terminal and plugged in his data device. "I'm uploading everything to the station's main network. Every terminal, every display, every communication channel. Everyone is going to see what you planned." Vorkath roared and drew his weapon, but Xylaneth stepped in front of Jake. "Stand down, General. It's over." "Move aside, Princess." "No." Her bioluminescent glow brightened to blazing gold. "I am the heir to this empire. I command you to stand down." For a moment, everything hung in balance. The guards looked between Vorkath and the princess, unsure who to obey. Then the screens throughout the command center lit up with the evidence. The altered communications, the conversation about the attack, Vorkath's own words condemning 15,000 civilians to death, and it wasn't just the command center. Thanks to Jake's upload, every screen on Crown Station was showing the same information. Every terminal in the Zephyrian Empire was broadcasting the conspiracy. Vorkath's face twisted with rage, but his guards were already lowering their weapons. Some looked horrified at what they were seeing. Others looked ashamed. "You've destroyed everything," the general snarled. "No," Jake said. "We stopped you from destroying everything. There's a difference." Ships began appearing on the tactical displays, vessels from across the Empire, responding to the broadcast. Among them were ships loyal to the Emperor, racing toward Crown Station. Vorkath was arrested along with Drellmon and their co-conspirators. The Emperor, once he recovered from the drugs they'd given him, ordered a full investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. But Jake knew the real fight was just beginning. They'd stopped the conspiracy, but they'd also exposed deep divisions within the Zephyrian Empire, and humanity was still in the middle of it all, more vulnerable than ever. The throne room of Crown Station had never been so full. Representatives from every member species of the Galactic Council stood in careful rows, watching as Emperor Zarnoth addressed them from his raised platform. His bioluminescent patterns were stern and formal, showing the weight of what had happened. Jake stood with his crew near the human delegation area. His ribs were still bandaged from the fight with the princess, and he had new bruises from the escape from the military command center. But he stood straight, knowing that every eye in the room was watching how humanity conducted itself in this moment. "The conspiracy against humanity has been exposed," the Emperor announced, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "General Vorkath, High Chancellor Drellmon, and their followers have been arrested and will face trial for treason. They sought to manipulate my empire into an unjust war, using deception and murder to achieve their goals. Murmurs ran through the assembled crowd. Some species looked relieved. Others looked uncertain, as if they weren't sure whether to believe what had happened. "Captain Morrison," the Emperor continued, "please step forward." Jake walked to the center of the room, very aware of how alone he looked, surrounded by beings from civilizations thousands of years older than his own. "You have done my empire a great service," the Emperor said. "You exposed traitors and prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives. For this you have my gratitude and the gratitude of all loyal Zephyrians." "I only did what was necessary, Your Majesty," Jake replied. "I wanted to prevent innocent people from dying. Nevertheless, the Empire owes you a debt. What compensation would you ask for?" This was the moment Jake had been thinking about since everything happened. He could ask for territory, for technology, for favorable trade agreements. Earth would benefit greatly from any of those things. But he'd learned something from his time on Crown Station. He'd learned that respect couldn't be bought or given. It had to be earned. "I ask for nothing, Your Majesty," Jake said clearly, "except the chance for humanity to prove itself as equals among the Council. No special treatment. No exceptions, just the opportunity to show what we can do." The room fell silent. This wasn't what anyone expected. The Emperor's patterns shifted to a warm gold. "You are either very wise or very foolish, Captain. Perhaps both. Very well. Humanity shall have its place on the Council, earned through your actions. May you prove worthy of it." The formal ceremony continued, but Jake was only half paying attention. He was watching Princess Xylaneth, who stood near her father's throne. Her expression was unreadable, her glow carefully neutral. After the ceremony ended, Jake found himself standing on one of the station's observation decks, looking out at the stars. He'd sent his crew back to the Valiant to prepare for the journey home. After everything that had happened, he just wanted a moment of quiet. "Captain Morrison." He turned to find Princess Xylaneth approaching. She was dressed more simply now, without the ceremonial armor or formal robes. Her bioluminescent patterns were a soft blue, which he'd learned meant contemplation or sadness. "Your Highness," he said formally. "You can call me Xyla," she said, standing beside him at the window. "I think we're past formal titles after everything." "All right. Xyla, then. And I'm Jake." They stood in silence for a moment, watching ships move around the station like fireflies against the darkness. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "Several, actually. I challenged you out of arrogance. I helped the conspirators out of wounded pride. I nearly caused a war because I couldn't accept that I'd been beaten fairly." "You also stopped the conspiracy," Jake pointed out. "You could have stayed silent and let it happen, but you chose to do the right thing. Only after nearly doing the wrong thing." She looked at him. "How do you bear the weight of your choices? You fought me knowing you might die. You risked everything to expose the truth. How do you live with that kind of pressure?" Jake thought about it. "I don't think about it as pressure. I think about it as responsibility. We all make choices, and those choices have consequences. The best we can do is try to make choices we can live with." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm human. We're not smart enough to think about all the things that could go wrong. We just do what feels right and hope for the best." Xyla made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Is that what makes humans so dangerous? Your ability to act without overthinking?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's our ability to forgive. You tried to humiliate me in front of the galaxy. You helped plan a conspiracy against my people. But you also saved me when it mattered. You chose honor over pride. That means something." "My father wants me to serve as ambassador to humanity," she said quietly. "He believes I need to learn more about your species, to understand what I underestimated. He thinks sending me to Earth would be appropriate penance for my actions." Jake looked at her in surprise. "How do you feel about that?" Terrified, she admitted. I know nothing about your world, except that it produced someone who defeated me. Someone who showed me that strength comes in forms I never considered. She paused. But also curious. I want to understand what I missed, what I was too proud to see. Earth isn't easy, Jake warned. We're loud and chaotic, and we argue about everything. We don't have 10,000 years of civilization teaching us how to be peaceful. We're still figuring things out as we go. Good, Zyla said. I've had enough of perfect ancient wisdom. Maybe chaos is what I need. 6 months later, a Zephyrian diplomatic ship arrived in orbit around Earth. Princess Xylaneth stepped off the transport at the space elevator platform, looking around at the planet below with wide eyes. Everything was so different from what she'd known. The cities were a mix of old and new architecture. The people rushed around with energy that seemed almost frantic compared to the careful dignity of Zephyrian culture. Jake was waiting for her at the platform, dressed in casual clothes instead of his uniform. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "Ready for this?" "I lasted more than a minute against you," she replied with a hint of her old pride. "I can handle your planet." "We'll see about that," Jake said with a grin. "Come on. I'm teaching a class at the military academy this afternoon. Human and alien cadets learning to work together. I thought you might want to sit in." As they walked through the academy grounds, Zyla saw exactly what Jake had meant about chaos. Human cadets were training alongside aliens from a dozen species, all of them shouting and laughing and pushing each other to do better. There was no careful hierarchy, no ancient protocol, just beings working together to become stronger. In the classroom, Jake introduced her to the students. "This is Ambassador Xylaneth of the Zephyrian Empire. Some of you may have heard about our fight in the arena." "You mean when she got her butt kicked?" one of the human cadets called out, and the others laughed. Zyla stiffened, her patterns flashing with offense. But then she saw Jake was smiling, and even the alien cadets were grinning. It wasn't mockery. It was just how humans showed affection, through jokes and teasing. "Actually," she said, surprising herself, "I lasted 20 minutes, which is 19 minutes longer than most beings last against a Zephyrian warrior." "Fair point," the cadet said, nodding with respect. Jake began his lesson, discussing the importance of understanding different combat styles and ways of thinking. Zyla watched as human and alien students worked together, combining their different strengths to solve problems. A human cadet used quick thinking to compensate for an alien partner's slower reaction time. An alien used superior strength to protect a human's vulnerable areas. They weren't trying to be the same. They were using their differences to make each other stronger. After class, Jake and Zyla walked through a garden on the academy grounds. Earth plants grew alongside species from other worlds, creating something beautiful and strange. "I understand now," Zyla said quietly. "What I missed before." "What's that?" "I thought strength meant being superior to everyone else, being faster, stronger, smarter. But you showed me that real strength is knowing your limits and working with others to overcome them. Humans aren't the strongest species or the fastest or the smartest, but you're very good at bringing out the best in everyone around you, including yourselves." "We're still learning," Jake said. "We make mistakes all the time, but we keep trying to do better." "That's another thing I've learned," Zyla said. "Perfection isn't as valuable as persistence. You humans don't quit, even when you probably should." They reached a memorial garden dedicated to humans and aliens who had died in various conflicts. Names from 100 worlds were carved into stone, remembered together. "This is what we're building," Jake said, gesturing to the memorial. "Not human dominance or Zephyrian control or any single species ruling the galaxy. Just beings from different worlds, working together, remembering each other." Zyla looked at the names, at the humans and aliens walking past in friendship, at the alien and human cadets training together in the distance. She thought about how she'd looked at Jake that first day, seeing only a primitive human who needed to be put in his place. How blind she'd been, how much she'd nearly destroyed because of that blindness. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what? For not giving up on me. You could have let me stay the arrogant princess. You could have made me your enemy. Instead, you gave me a chance to be better." Jake smiled. That's what friends do. Zyla felt her patterns shift to a warm gold, the color of genuine happiness. Friends. Yes. I'd like that. As they continued walking through the garden, neither of them noticed the group of cadets watching from a distance. Human and alien students standing together, looking at the captain and the princess, seeing not just different species, but the possibility of what could be achieved when pride gave way to understanding. One of the human cadets, a young woman named Casey, nudged her alien classmate. "Think we'll ever be like them? Making history?" The alien, a young Zephyrian male named Vel, watched the princess with wonder. She defeated her own prejudice. Captain Morrison defeated an empire's pride. Yes, I think we can make history, but only if we remember what they taught us. What's that? That strength isn't about being superior. It's about being willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when everyone tells you it's impossible. Casey grinned. "So basically act like idiots and hope for the best?" "Isn't that the human way?" Vel replied, and they both laughed. Far above them, in orbit, ships from Earth and the Zephyrian Empire flew together on joint patrol. Human and alien crews working side by side, protecting a future that neither species could have built alone. And on Crown Station, Emperor Zarnoth looked at reports of increasing cooperation between species, of old enemies becoming new friends, of a galaxy slowly learning that diversity wasn't weakness, but strength. "You were right, my daughter," he said to the empty throne room. "The humans do have something to teach us. They remind us that we are all still learning, still growing. And that's not a weakness. It's what keeps us alive." The message was sent to Earth, where Jake received it in his quarters at the academy. He read it once, then twice, then smiled and filed it away. Tomorrow he'd show it to Zyla, and they'd probably argue about what it meant. That was how their friendship worked now, through challenge and debate and occasional combat practice where she still usually won. But that was okay, because winning wasn't the point anymore. The point was growing, learning, becoming better together than they ever could have been alone. And in the end, that was the real victory.